Hello and welcome to the world of NDE 4.0. My name is Johannes Vrana and today is a great day because today we'll get to a really essential topic of Industry 4.0, NDE 4.0, the IIoT, all those emerging technologies we're currently talking about. In the last videos, we talked a lot about the Industrial Internet of Things, IIoT, and how to integrate NDE, non-destructive evaluation. But how do we make the IIoT safe? In particular, if we not only consider a company's network, but if we consider a connected world, the Industrial Internet of Things, if we transfer data from one company to another company, how do we make sure that our data is safe? And actually, once we talk about that, we should also talk about, how do we clarify actually who owns the data? Now, actually, we already talked about data security a couple of months ago, and I will leave a link to that video right here. Now, back then, we really talked about the fundamental basics. Now, we really get into, how can we apply those to the Industrial Internet of Things? And we will not only talk about individual computers or corporate networks, we will also consider the connected world, how to connect to other companies. And for me, that is in particular important for NDE. As with NDE, it's always that we have to connect our inspection companies with asset OEMs, with suppliers, and also with the owner operators. So let's get started. Now, what we talked about back in that video I referenced before, we talked about data security, and we talked about the two main points to data security. Number one, backup, meaning protection against destructive forcing, hardware defects, viruses, so that if something like that would happen to my notebook, it would be kind of a tragedy because I lost my notebook, but it wouldn't be that bad because I didn't lose my data. And for me, such a backup is really important for your personal computer, for corporate networks, and also for the corporate world. And you can see here, all the way here on top, we have here those three little icons. And with those icons, I will symbolize, once I presented a technology, whether I think it is more interesting for a certain area than for others. The other topic we discussed back in that video was data encryption. So protection against unauthorized users, cyber attacks, and data breaches. So let's say we want to transfer data from one computer to another computer, from Alice to Bob. And we might have somebody who wants to eavesdrop on our communication. So what do? We use a so-called asymmetric cryptography to exchange the key. And once both Alice and Bob have the key, then actually we use a so-called symmetric cryptography to actually close the gate, to encrypt all of our data, so that Eve can finally not listen to it. Now, if you're interested more in detail into those topics, please go ahead and watch that video I did about half a year ago. So now, what we have by now, we have a secure line between Alice and Bob. But let's say we want to transfer this picture from Alice to Bob. And Bob receives it and sees this picture. Now you might say, that's just a picture and Bob will obviously see that this picture is not good, so he can ask Alice, can you send it to me again? Yes, that's right. But actually, for Bob asking Alice, can you send it again? That's a manual process. So that's a process we do not like. And number two, yes, on this example, it might be obvious, but let's say we do not transfer a picture, but we transfer data. So perhaps we transfer an indication size. And let's say that indication has a size in reality of 12.3. Now, due to some hiccup on our line, actually Bob receives instead of 12.3, which might be clearly something to reject a component with such a big indication. Bob receives it and gets a number of 1.23. Now, based on that decision of such a tiny indication, Bob might perhaps decide, yeah, we can accept that component. Or vice versa. Let's say we send the result of our non-destructive testing, and the result we send is okay. We can still use the part. But what Bob does, he receives a not okay. And actually between an okay and a not okay, that is just one bit of information. So it's just a bit flip. That's something which can easily occur. And in that case, Bob would decide to scrap that component, even that in reality it is a good component. So we don't want to have such a situation. So what we need data integrity. We need data accuracy, we need data consistency. And for that, what we have to do, we have to validate the data. And an easy way of doing that is using so-called hashes. So we take all of the information we have on the side of Alice, we calculate a small number out of all of this information, we send the data, and we send the number. Bob receives all of the data, does again his calculation of that hash value, and compares the hash value he received with the hash value he actually calculated himself. If both are the same, he knows that the data is actually accurate and consistent. And this is here symbolized by this small hash symbol that we exchange this hash in addition to our keys. So what is our situation? We have a secure line between Alice and Bob. And we make sure that nobody's eavesdropping on our communication. Further, we have some methods to actually ensure data integrity. But now we are talking about a connected world. So there might be a third person interacting. Let's call her Carol. And Carol asks Bob, can you give me the data? Bob takes a USB stick, pops it into his computer, gives it over to Carol. Now, you might ask, is this really allowed that Bob can give it to Carol? Let's see. Let's talk about data protection. Now, from a legal standpoint, and this really also depends on the country you live in or you have your company residing in. If it's artistic data, like music, movies, picture, text, sculptures, whatever, I guess you get the idea. That data is protected in most countries. Mostly for something like 70 or 90 years, something like that. And personal data. Normally personal data is also protected. Your financial data, all the data you put on internet and social media, your locational data, your medical records, your political opinions, all of that is considered personal data and is protected for your use only in most countries. But we are not talking about art and personal data in this channel. We're talking about NDE, non-destructive material evaluation. Some of you might argue that NDE is kind of an art. Yes. But I guess if you go to some court, you might have the situation that they have problems following your argumentation that NDE is art. No, it's not art. Now, NDE might contain some personal data, but only a fraction. Most of the NDE data is not personal data. So, meaning your NDE data is not protected. And it's similar for all the data, or for most of the data we have in industrial production or in industrial maintenance. So what can we do? We have this situation. What we can do is actually we can include into our NDAs we have between company A and B, we can include some paragraphs about how to deal with data. What Bob is actually allowed to do once he receives data from Alice. And if that NDA states you can give the data to somebody third, he's allowed. If the contract actually doesn't say anything, he's also allowed, only if the contract says you are not allowed to give the data to somebody else, then he's not allowed to give it to Carol. And actually, if you think about it, this is also the basis to clarify data ownership. Now, I got asked a question about data ownership. I don't know how often since I started with NDE 4.0. And the question or the answer to that question is actually easy. From a legal standpoint, for NDE data, data ownership is not clear. It's not clarified in any document. You have to do it on a contract between Alice and Bob. Otherwise, if you give the data from Alice to Bob, then Bob can do whatever he wants with it if it's not stipulated somehow in the NDA or in some other legal documents. Now, I'm not a legal person, and I hope that the information I gave here is kind of correct. If not, please tell me. But I'm also pretty sure this also depends a little bit from country to country. Anyway, as I said, I'm not a legal person, I'm a technical person, and I always favor technical solution to legal documents. So I would like to actually clarify data sovereignty, data ownership in a technical way and not just on a legal basis. So how can we do that? Now, let's take one step back. Let's go to our corporate networks. Now, within a corporate network, you might have one group here and one working group here. Each of those working groups has their individual network drives, and all of the members of that group can access that network drive. And if somebody from another group wants to access a certain folder, he has to ask for permission. And then you can give him read permission, write permission, or also the permission to execute so-called executables. For that to work, you actually have to identify and authenticate the user. You have to see, has that user the authorization, the right to actually read, write, or execute that file? And then you might want to trace also all the accesses to all your files, audit trails and some logs, so that later on you can find out who actually accessed which file. Now, with accountability, it's a little bit tricky because now coming back a little bit to legal, because this is now personal data. Because now you can say, okay, this person accessed a certain file at a certain date. That's kind of personal data. So that's where we have to be careful. But besides that, we were talking about how access control can actually help us with our communication in our connected industry 4.0 world, in our industrial Internet of Things, where we communicate with other companies. Now what we can do, we have our communication set up between Alice and Bob. We have our secure data line and we send the data. But we not only send data, we also send some usage permissions, which is a file, and that file describes that Bob can actually view the data on his computer. but he's not allowed to give it to Carol. Now, how do we make sure of this? Now, what we actually do, we run a program on Bob, a program which is certified by Alice or certified by a third party that it acts exactly how it's supposed to act. Now, that program actually takes the usage permissions, and what you can see, actually, the key, which was the previous slides, it was at the location of Bob. Now it's in that application. So Bob can actually not access directly the data, but Bob has to give the data to that application, and depending on the usage permissions, Bob can then view the data using that application. And if the usage permissions allow to copy the data on a USB stick and to give it to Carol, yes, then Bob can do that. But if the program says, no, you're not allowed to copy any of your data onto your local hard drive or on a USB stick or copy it to your email, then Bob, just simply from a technical standpoint, he cannot do it. And that's the way I like the things to be done. So this data sovereignty, this technical solution to maintain data sovereignty is kind of an enhanced access control. It can be used within companies and between companies. So actually this can also enhance the situation we described before with the access control between the different user groups. And it allows really tailored usage descriptions. It can, for example, say, Bob is allowed to view the data once, and after he viewed it, the data has to be deleted. So what does the program do? Bob opens the viewer, looks at the data once, closes it, and the program automatically deletes the data because that's what the usage permissions require. Or it could also be that actually Bob is only allowed to view a fraction of the data, and for the other fraction of the data, he has to have somebody from Alice sitting next to him so that he cannot take a screenshot or something like that. Or all kinds of different situations. Or Bob gets the data, can view all of the data, but he's only allowed to give a fraction of the data to his customer. So this really opens up a whole new scenario. And there is already an implementation out there for data sovereignty, and that's produced by the so-called International Data Spaces Association, IDSA. And you can see here on this graph from the IDSA how they picture it and how they establish this network. And you can see all those so-called IDS connectors. Those IDS connectors are kind of those programs we talked about on the last slide. Which really, those IDS connectors are certified by a third party. You install it on your computer so that you can access the data. And then actually, yeah, you can use an industrial data cloud to transfer data from company 1 to 2, or directly from company 2 to company N. You can also have it to actually access some enterprise clouds. It's working for an Internet of Things cloud, and so on and so on. It's also a way to access publicly available data. So data sovereignty is really, it's the basis for data exchange between companies. If we want to get to that solution, please do not use emails for real data exchange. Use a solution like this, because this makes sure if you send an email to somebody else, I don't think you have it in your NDAs that that person receiving it is not allowed to copy that data over and give it to somebody else. But with data sovereignty, we have a technical solution to make sure that if you send data to somebody else, he's not allowed to send it out to somebody else. It's also the possibility to make sure that if you own data, that you can actually control who can use that data you have created. You can clarify who owns the data. And if you send it to Bob and tell in that user description, you are the new owner for that data, or both of us are owners of the data, then it is clear. And this also enables one step further. Now, we can send data in a safe way from A to B, but we can also sell our data to somebody else and get money for all of the data. And we can even still control a little bit what will be done with our data. So that, for example, it can only be used for scientific approaches, but not really to actually create a product. And this is why, for me, IDSA data sovereignty is essential for NDE. Because within NDE, we always have those data connections, this data exchange between the inspection companies, the asset OEMs, the suppliers, and the owner-operators. And it's also the way that we can ensure that actually we, as an NDE community can benefit from the value of our data. And not like we used to have it on some of the social media platforms, that they make a lot of money with our data, with the data we are giving them without earning anything. So thanks a lot for watching. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, particularly to my legal statements, please write them down here in the comment section. Next time, we will get kind of to the core of the whole fourth revolution, the cyber-physical loop. Because that cyber-physical loop really is what keeps all of those different emerging technologies, including IIoT, including digital twin, including AI, which keeps all of those connected in a loop, and which creates actually the value of those fourth revolutions. As usual, you will find more information in the description. I hope you like this video. I hope you subscribe to this channel. I hope you give me a thumbs up for this video. I hope I will see you soon. So thank you for watching. See you soon. Thank you and bye.